Good afternoon. Just checking audio and video.
Good afternoon. We can hear and see you clearly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll do a quick audio check too. Hello, everybody.
Hello. We can see and hear you as well. The interpretation or interpreter button is available. It has been enabled, so you can go ahead and select either English or Spanish. Please be sure to do that so you can actually hear the meeting today. Yes, you can go ahead and do that. Thank you.
Señorita interpretadora, ¿puede explicar cómo hacerlo para aquellos que no sepan hacer el cambio? Gracias.
My apologies. It was a little fire, not an actual fire, but a little bit of a thing.
Chair Vargas, it's hard to hear you.
Oh, I said my apologies. I had a little bit of a issue I had to take care of. So my Give me 1 second, and I'm all yours. Okay, I'm ready. 2 minutes late. I apologize.
You have a quorum.
Thank
And
you, ma'am. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I now call this meeting to order. Welcome to the March 10, 2022 meeting of the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District Governing Board. Before we begin the meeting, I would like to inform the public that simultaneous Spanish language interpretation is available. I'd like to ask my colleagues to please select the English option using the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen. Once it becomes available after the interpreter explains the accessibility features in the Spanish. I'm going to turn it over to the interpreter. If you have interpreter speaking, do you know? Madam Clerk,
hello?
do you know if the interpreter?
Yes, I can hear you.
So-
The interpreter button is enabled at the bottom of your screen. Please select the English channel at this time. For all those that are participating, please select the English channel. Yes, I can hear you on the English channel. I think she can hear you as well now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you.
Roll call.
Yes, I was going to turn it over to you, Madam Chair. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Chair Vargas. I would like to ask that all meeting participants please make sure that you have selected either English or Spanish interpretation at the bottom of your screen. Before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that members Lawson, Reamer, and Martinez have notified the clerk of the boards that they will be absent from today's proceedings. All remaining board members are participating via teleconference. As such, all votes will be taken by roll call vote. With that, Member Birkbeck Garcia.
Present.
Member Bush.
Here.
Member Ela Rivera.
Present.
Member Gomez.
Here.
Member Medina.
Medina here.
Member Shu.
Here.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Sanchez here.
Chair Vargas.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to remind board members to please turn your cameras on and ask that you mute your microphone. If you are not speaking, and if you'd like to, when you're not speaking, if you'd like to comment, please raise your hand and I will recognize you. I'm also going to ask that for votes, please say your last name after your vote. And now we're going to move over to public communication. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the board on any subject matter within the board's jurisdiction, but not on any of today's items on the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to address the board under this item?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. While we have not received any requests to speak under public communication today, I would ask those members of the public if they are on the conference line now and wish to address the board under public communication, to please indicate that by using the raise hand feature through Zoom or by pressing *9 now. Seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public wishing to address the board under non-agenda public communication this afternoon.
Thank you. All right, approval of the February 10th, 2020 minutes. We're going to go ahead and move over to that. San Diego County Air Pollution Control District Governing Statement of Proceedings. Before we move on for approval, Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to address the board under this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If there are any members of the public that wish to address the board under item C, approval of February 10th, 2022 Statement of Proceedings, please use the raise hand feature via Zoom or press *9 now to indicate that you wish to speak on this item. Seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public that wish to address this item today.
Madam Vice Chair?
Sanchez moves approval.
Well, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Medina, second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. Member Birkbeck Garcia,
Birkbeck Garcia, yes.
Member Bush,
Bush, yes.
Member Elo Rivera,
Elo Rivera, yes.
Member Gomez,
Yes.
Member Medina,
Medina, aye.
Member Shu,
Shu, yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez,
Sanchez, aye.
Chair Vargas.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes with those board members who are present voting aye.
Thank you. We will now move on to the consent calendar. Madam Clerk, can you please provide the public testimony instructions for those members of the public that wish to move an item from the consent calendar to the regular agenda for discussion?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. I would ask any members of the public that would like to speak on this item to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on our website. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature through Zoom or by pressing *9 now. We have not received any requests to speak on this item, and I'll give it a few seconds to see if anyone raises their hand on the line. And seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public wishing to pull an item from consent to the regular agenda.
Thank you. Are there any questions from my colleagues or any board members wish to move any matters from the consent calendar to the regular agenda? Madam Vice Chair?
Sanchez moves approval of the consent calendar.
Thank you.
second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. Member Birkbeck Garcia,
Birkbeck Garcia, aye.
Member Bush,
Bush, yes.
Member Elo Rivera,
Elo Rivera, yes.
Member Gomez,
Yes.
Member Medina,
Medina, aye.
Member Shu,
Shu, aye.
Vice Chair Sanchez,
Sanchez, aye.
Chair Vargas.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you. That motion adopts the following resolutions. A resolution authorizing continuance of teleconference public meetings pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E. A resolution of the Governing Board of the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District adopting a conflict of interest code pursuant to Government Code Section 81000 et sec. And a resolution adopting amendments to Rule 12, registration of specified equipment of Regulation 2 of the rules and regulations of the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. That motion passes with those board members who are present voting aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will now move on to our agenda items. Our first agenda item for discussion is item E1, public hearing to receive the presentation for proposed amendments to Rule 40, permit and other fees, and Rule 42, hearing board fees for the fiscal year 2022-2023. Madam Clerk, can you please provide the public testimony instructions?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. I would ask those members of the public that have requested to speak on this item to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on our website. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item using the raise hand feature through Zoom or by pressing *9 now. Your testimony will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Are there any public comments on this item?
We have received no request to speak on this item.
Okay. Let me go ahead and turn it over to staff for presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Can we pull up the presentation and get that started? Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Vargas and board members. My name is Mike Watt, Deputy Director for the district. Today's hearing is to receive a presentation and consider public comments on proposed amendments to Rule 40, permit and other fees, and Rule 42, hearing board fees. I'm joined today by John Jayasinga, the Chief of Business Support Services, as well as the other Deputy Directors and Division Chiefs. Next slide, please. I'd like to provide some background on the actions taken to date as the district continues to work towards full cost recovery. In July of 2020, the state auditor issued their report, which identified that the district fee-related expenses were not being fully recovered and included a recommendation to increase fees annually by the maximum percentage allowed until the district's revenue from fees equal the cost of the program. In April of 2021, the district completed a cost recovery study, which provided a tool for understanding current service levels and the cost and demand for those services. In May of 2021, the governing board formed a cost recovery task force consisting of board members Gomez, Medina, and Shu. The task force worked with district staff to identify a preferred cost recovery plan scenario, which was then adopted by the board. Public hearings on the fiscal year 21-22 amendments to District Rules 40 and 42 were held in October and December of 2021, and the board adopted the proposal recommended by the cost recovery task force at that time. The adopted fiscal year 21-22 fee increases went into effect on January 1st, 2022. In February of 2022, the district updated its analysis and met with the cost recovery task force to review cost recovery scenarios and receive a recommendation for fiscal year 22-23 amendments. As part of our stakeholder outreach and engagement process, the district reached out to over 3,500 permit holders, stakeholders, and industry groups through direct mailings, emails sent out to GovDelivery subscribers, and the posting of information on the district website about today's hearing and the proposed amendments. Today is the first of two scheduled public hearings on proposed amendments to District Rules 40 and 42 for fiscal years 22-23. If approved at next month's meetings, the amendments to district fees, would become effective on July 1st, 2022. I'll now turn it over to John Jayasinga to discuss the proposed amendments to the fees in Rule 40 and 42.
Thank you, Mike. This is an overview. Oh, next slide, please. This is an overview of the presentation items, a review of the district's vision and mission, an overview of cost recovery model updates and additional services included in this year's study, a summary of the cost recovery analysis and results, the cost recovery task force recommendation, and the requested actions. Next slide, please. I want to lead into this presentation by restating the district vision and mission, which today's recommended actions will further support. Everyone in communities throughout the region has the right to clean air. The district upholds this right through its vision of clean air for all. The district will achieve its vision by fulfilling the daily mission to improve air quality, to protect public health and the environment. As the district heads into the future, the governing board and district staff will continue working collaboratively with stakeholders to design and implement effective strategies that preserve our greatest resource of all, our air. Next slide, please. The district cost recovery study is analyzed and updated each year with the most recent cost and revenue data, estimates, and projections. It is important to note that each year, the cost, revenue, and deficit estimated amounts will change based on the most recent analysis. For the fiscal year 22-23 cost recovery model, the district project team made the following key updates and changes. The fiscal year 22-23 study focused on updating the model to include changes in costs reflected in the board adopted budget, such as salaries and benefits, and cost changes resulting from updated workload volume, as well as changes in revenue based on the board adopted fee increases and updated workload volume estimates. The analysis also factored programmatic updates into the model, and such as the implementation of an in-house after-hours complaint program adopted by the board last month, and additional support for the environmental justice program in the form of staffing and budget for increased outreach costs. The district is also proposing to convert certain permit application fees from fixed or flat fee to a time and material fee for two main reasons. First, some fixed fee applications are processed infrequently, and there was no substantial time tracking information to rely upon when developing reasonable averages. Therefore, it was determined to convert these to time and material so that those applications are charged their workload and effort. Second, when evaluating time tracking data, some fixed fee applications had a variance in workload, and as such, it was determined that there was no reasonable average that can be estimated for these items, and a time and material category is more appropriate. The district is also proposing a simplified rate structure or blended rate to streamline and promote greater transparency as it relates to time and material fees. Implementing this new approach will allow the district to better capture the range of different services it provides in a more consistent manner. These proposed updates and changes are reflected in revised Rule 40 fee schedules that are posted on the district website. Next slide, please. The goal of this study was to update the analysis from last year based upon new inputs associated with staffing, projected cost, estimated workload, as well as any changes in fee structures. Projected costs and estimated revenues are based on the current year adopted budget and most recent workload information, and will fluctuate year to year due to shifts in staffing levels, program costs, workload, and other factors. When comparing fiscal year 21-22 fee-related costs with fee-related revenue, the district is under recovering its costs by approximately $3.4 million. Currently, the overall estimated cost recovery percentage for all fee categories is 72%. Part of today's recommendations is for the governing board to find that the revenues being generated by the fees currently set forth in Rule 40 and 42 are insufficient to fully recover the costs of the district programs, as demonstrated in this cost recovery study and shown here. Next slide, please. Prior to the implementation of fee increases in January 2022, the district had not raised fees in 3 years. Prior fee updates were in 2019, 2018, and 2017. The district did not increase fees for 5 consecutive years, from 2012 to 2016. On February 9th, 2022, the Cost Recovery Task Force recommended to continue the cost recovery plan for fiscal year 22-23 to apply a 15% aggregate cap increase to applications, renewals, source testing, time and materials, and administrative processing fees, and apply a 25% increase for asbestos and hearing board fees. Under the recommended fee increase, the district would be projected to increase its estimated cost recovery from 72% to approximately 83%. The Cost Recovery Task Force recommendation allows the district to focus on increasing revenues across all fee categories consistent with the previous year's increase and generate additional revenue to continue to increase the district's cost recovery. Under the recommended fee increase, the district would be projected to increase its estimated revenue by $1.3 million and decrease its projected deficit from $3.4 million to $2.1 million. The key advantages to this recommendation is that it's consistent with the previous board adopted practice, enables the district to continue its movement towards increasing cost recovery, and applies fee increases consistently across the categories. If adopted at next month's hearing, the proposed amendments would become effective on July 1st, 2022, which will allow for testing of new fees, revised invoicing, and continued outreach to stakeholders prior to implementation. Next slide, please.
John, sorry to interrupt. I think we missed the opportunity to advance the slide. So the speaking points you just spoke to were relevant to this particular slide. Sorry.
No problem. So the speaking points I just mentioned were just mentioned for the 1.3 that you see on the bottom of the right. Do you want me to repeat the speaking points?
I don't think so, unless the board members do. We can come back to it, but I think the takeaway is, our current revenues are at about 8.8 million. Projected revenues would increase that by to 10.3, which is an increase of about 1.3 million. I think that's the takeaway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then we can go to the next slide, please. Today's recommended actions are to open a public hearing on the proposed amendments to Rule 40 and 42, find that the revenues being generated by the fee rates currently set forth in Rule 40 and 42 are insufficient to fully recover the costs of the district programs, direct the Air Pollution Control Officer to return to the board on April 14th to consider adoption of proposed amendments to Rule 40 and 42, and find that the requested action is exempt from the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, section 15273, which exempts projects that involve the establishment or modification of charges by public agencies. Thank you very much. This concludes our presentation.
Thank you so much for that very thorough presentation. Are there any, I'll go ahead and ask again if there's any public comments after the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have not had any members of the public on the line raise their hand to indicate that they would like to speak on this item. So seeing no hands raised, there's no public testimony on this item.
Any board member comments? Oh, I don't see any. Okay. Madam Vice Chair? You are muted, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we did go through this pretty much in detail once before, and I think we spent more than an hour or so on really going through this, and I really appreciate the work of the committee, the committee of three. So at this time, I would like to move that we adopt staff's recommendations with respect to all four requests.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll go ahead and second Gomez. And it's a mighty committee of three, I might say.
I'm sorry I left that word out.
Thank you.
You shortened our time today, so yes. Yes, thank you.
Oh, I did want to say thank you. Thank you. We have a motion and a second, but I wanted to say thank you to the committee members for doing the heavy lifting on this item and for the recommendations. And so we have a motion and a second, Madam Clerk, unless there's any other discussion from the committee members or any of the members of the board. All right, seeing that, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. Member Birkbeck Garcia.
Birkbeck Garcia, aye.
Member Bush.
Bush, yes.
Member Elo Rivera.
Elo Rivera, yes.
Member Gomez.
Gomez, yes.
Member Medina.
Medina, aye.
Member Shu.
Shu, aye.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Sanchez, aye.
Chair Vargas.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you. That motion passes with all board members who are present voting aye.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you so much for the subcommittee that did so much great work. Our next agenda item for consideration is item E2, budget and staffing adjustments for the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District grants and incentives. There is an APCD staff presentation that will be given for this item. But before we begin, Madam Clerk, can you please provide the public testimony instructions?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. I would ask those members of the public that would like to speak on this item to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided to you online. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature through Zoom or by pressing *9 now. Your testimony will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Thank you. So let me go ahead and ask to turn it over to the staff for a presentation.
Great, thank you very much. We can pull up the slides, please. Okay, outstanding. Good afternoon again, Chair Vargas and board members. My name is still Mike Watt, Deputy Director for the district. We're before you today to request adjustments to the fiscal year 21-22 budget, including increases in appropriations for several incentive program funds and additional staffing resources to help the district effectively and efficiently implement these grant programs and maximize air quality benefits while meeting stringent program requirements. I'm joined today by Kathy Kean, the manager of our district's planning and incentives team. Next slide, please. The district receives state and federal grant funding such as AB 617 Community Air Protection Program Implementation Funds, various grants to incentivize emission reduction projects, and other funding to further our efforts in creating clean air for all. These granted incentive programs comprise approximately 40% of the district's budget in fiscal year 21-22 and continue to grow year over year. Several of these incentive programs have expanded this year, and the district expects to receive more funding than was anticipated in the fiscal year 21-22 budget. Response to the district's recent call for incentive project proposals resulted in nearly 250 applications for emission reduction projects, which are expected to expend the available funding. To meet program commitments and ensure emission reduction projects can move forward before the end of this fiscal year, mid-year budget and staffing adjustments are needed. I'll now turn it over to Kathy Kean to discuss today's requested actions in more detail. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Kean, and I manage the district's planning and incentives team, as Mike mentioned. During last month's meeting, we provided an overview of the district's incentive programs, and here's a quick recap of what we talked about. The district participates in the administration of 8 incentive programs, with at least one more planned to open in 2022. The district uses incentives to achieve early excess emission reductions in places where they're most needed. These programs can help incentivize the transition to new technologies like cleaner and zero emission equipment. The programs must work within the timelines and guidelines provided by the state and the federal funding programs. And we expect opportunities for incentives to grow given the state's emphasis on transitioning to zero emission equipment. Next slide, please. As Mike mentioned, in November of 2021, the district issued a call for projects and is currently evaluating 242 applications, which are expected to expend the available funding. To avoid delay and ensure emission reduction projects can begin their projects before the end of this fiscal year, mid-year budget and staffing adjustments are needed. Next slide, please. Several of these incentive programs, including the Carl Moyer program, the Funding Agricultural Replacement Measures for Emission Reductions, or the FARMER program, the Goods Movement Emission Reduction Program, have expanded this year across the state, and the district expects to receive more funding than was anticipated in the fiscal year 21-22 budget. Next slide, please. The budget adjustments outlined here are additional funds that will allow us to provide funding for projects earlier than would be allowed through the annual budget process. Currently, the district has signed grant agreements in place with the Air Resources Board or has been notified by the Air Resources Board that these additional revenues have been allocated to the district. Adopting these budget adjustments now provides flexibility to allow emission reduction projects to proceed more quickly, resulting in earlier air quality benefits and greater program efficiency. Next slide, please. Oops. Lost my next slide. There we go. District grant and incentive programs have grown in size and complexity over the last 5 years, particularly with the advent of the Community Air Protection Program and the new Clean Cars for All program. The district implemented incentive programs have grown from 5 programs in 2017 to 9 programs in 2022 and approximately $5 million in 2017 to 25 million in annual funding, while the grant program expenditure deadlines have remained the same, and monitoring, reporting, and implementation requirements have become more complex. It's worth noting that while the state or federal programs do provide funding to administer these activities, they do not usually provide enough funding to completely cover the cost of the programs to the district. Typically, the district supplements the program administrative funding with the vehicle registration fund. Next slide, please. The district also receives grant funding for monitoring and other district functions. One of these grant programs is the Community Air Protection Program, and to address pollution burdens faced by disadvantaged communities. As part of the Community Air Protection Program, which has just expanded to include the border area, APCD conducts localized monitoring of air pollutants. The maps on this slide show our existing monitoring sites for the program, as well as sites under construction and others in the initial planning stages. Data from this monitoring activity will be used to inform emission reduction strategies in these communities. Next slide, please. The additional funds and growth in the incentive programs and in the Community Air Protection Program necessitate the addition of staff to meet the district's current obligations. The 3 positions listed here are necessary to ensure the district has enough capacity to administer these programs in accordance with all the applicable guidelines. The requested positions are an associate air pollution chemist responsible for running the toxic volatile organic compound program operated within the AB 617 Portside community, a supervising air resources specialist responsible for implementing grant programs, including Clean Cars for All, and providing direct management over air quality planning activities, and an administrative analyst 2, responsible for administering the fiscal requirements of the various grant programs implemented by the district, including grant planning, monitoring, and reporting. These positions are particularly urgent given the anticipated grant agreement with CARB to implement the Clean Cars for All program and to meet the commitments for the Portside Community Air Protection Program. Waiting until the beginning of the next fiscal year to fill these positions will delay implementation of the programs by several months, and we want to start as soon as possible. If approved, these requests would result in additional current year estimated costs of $114,400 and ongoing estimated cost of $457,800 per fiscal year. These costs will be funded from a combination of grant administrative revenue from CARB and the District Vehicle Registration Fund. Next slide, please. APCD's prior board authorized the Air Pollution Control Officer or their designee to apply for and accept current and future funding for state and federal programs, to execute and amend grant agreements, and to implement programs in accordance with applicable guidelines. Today's action would refresh and continue this authority through the current APCD board. This will allow staff to carry out the day-to-day operations of these programs and ensure the region continues to receive the economic, air quality, and public health benefits these state and federally funded programs provide. Next slide, please. So today's requested actions are to increase appropriations for the Carl Moyer Farmer and Goods Movement Emission Reduction Program funds, add 3 full-time equivalent positions to support grant program implementation, authorize the Air Pollution Control Officer or their designee to apply for and accept grant funds, and find that this action does not constitute a project and would be exempt from CEQA. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that thorough presentation. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to provide public comment or public testimony, I should say?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have received no requests from members of the public to speak on this item. Also seeing no hands raised in our attendee queue. There are no members of the public that wish to provide public testimony on this item.
Members, any comments? Vice Chair, is that a motion that you wanted to make?
Always nice to receive more funding for all of our very critical needs here in the district. So yes, it is a motion.
Okay, so Before I take your motion, I just wanted to make a comment and inform the board that I did ask our Air Pollution Control District Director to look into a couple of different models for the future. This item is not on the agenda, so this is not for discussion. I just wanted to share that I brought it up to her, that as the CARB representative, and before we will always have a CARB representative as a member of APCD, right? And so if there's a way to have support for the board member that is the CARB representative, I think it would be great for APCD to be able to carve out that support as one of the staff members. It's a heavy lift, and I am really, really grateful that I have really brilliant staff. But in case some of you, in the case that also, I really believe in creating systems where it's long-term institutional change, so that in the future, if the person who's in this role doesn't have a David, and it's a part-time person or someone else, that CARB is able to help support that work. There's a couple of different models, both from South Coast Air Quality Management District and some other models in Northern California and other areas that help support that work that I think may be helpful. So I wanted to make sure that I just let you all know that that's a discussion that I had to make sure that we are able to have that discussion at some point, and I brought it forth to our director so that she is able to look into it as we're moving forward with budget. So I just wanted to, not an item for discussion, but I wanted to make sure that for transparency purposes. And then also wanted to update you all that CARB has been hearing loud and clear that funding for the AB 617 program for district support is needed, and that several board members, including myself, have elevated to the chair. And as CARB will continue to work through the legislature to make sure that district staffing capacity has the resources that we'll need to continue addressing our EJ communities. Had a really wonderful meeting yesterday with Asylum Garcia and some of the other local folks, looking at some budget requests, also some legislation around this issue. And I'm hoping that I will be able to bring some recommendations for support for some additional dollars that we can support. And I'm gonna, different mechanisms through South, I serve as the representative for South County, the state, what is it called? The State County Association of Governments. And then also for our county, to be able to support the legislation for AB 617, and then I think for APCD for maybe to take some positions on these issues. I just wanted to share the information because it's directly linked to budget as we're moving forward. So these are specific items, information that I wanted to share with you that I think will be connected to all of this as we're seeing, we're trying to move forward in the work that we're doing. So with that, the vice chair has made a motion. So if there's a second.
Bush second.
Thank you, sir. Any additional comments? Anything else? And thank you to staff for doing such a fantastic job. This will be your second official budget, right? As an independent entity?
This is our first budget adjustment of our first
Okay,
budget as an independent agency. Yep.
I love that. I'm a geek, so I think this is really cool.
I was going to see it going up, not down.
That's good. Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much for that. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. Member Burkbeck Garcia.
Burkbeck Garcia, aye.
Member Bush.
Bush, yes.
Member Elo Rivera.
Elo Rivera, yes.
Member Gomez.
Gomez, yes.
Member Medina.
Medina, aye.
Member Shu.
Shu, aye.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Sanchez, aye.
Chair Vargas.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you. That motion passes with all board members who are present voting aye.
Fantastic. All right. The next item is our Air Pollution Control Officer report. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Forbes. Thank you for the great work that you are doing. So, Madam.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Vargas and governing board members. I have just a few quick updates for you today. First, I want to make you and the public aware of a few public meetings and public engagement opportunities that are occurring this month. We published our draft public participation plan for public comment, and we'll be holding 2 public workshops. The first one is today at 5 p.m. and the next one is next Tuesday, March 15th at noon. And then next, a draft framework for APCD's Office of Environmental Justice will be published on Monday, March 14th for public comment, and a public workshop's being planned and will be announced next week. We plan to bring both the public participation plan and the Office of Environmental Justice framework to the board for your consideration next month. And then we're also going to be holding the first community meeting for our new AB 617 community, the International Border Community, next Wednesday, March 16th at 5 p.m. So we're really excited to get that, that community steering committee kicked off. And then related to our air toxics hotspots program, the district recently participated in 2 public meetings. On February 22nd, a public meeting was held for Pacific Ship Repair and Fabrication. And yesterday evening, a public meeting was held for BAE. So for additional information on any of these meetings, please refer to our website or contact me directly. And then next, congratulations are in order for the first anniversary of the Air District separation from the County of San Diego. We celebrated our first anniversary as an independent agency on March 1st. And we've accomplished a lot in the last year and acknowledge that there's still a lot of work ahead. The legislation that required our separation, AB 423, also includes some additional requirements to promote transparency and public engagement. So I wanted to give you a couple brief comments about our progress on those items. Notably, we were required to establish our own website, which we launched last November. And associated with that, we developed a new logo that better reflects our new vision and direction. And we still have a ways to go in ensuring public access to our data in the manner that was envisioned by AB 423, but our staff continues to work to expand that access through our website. We were also required to evaluate and bring to you a plan to improve our public complaint response process. And you approved that plan in February, and we're now working to implement it, which includes setting up an in-house 24-hour complaint line. Staff also brought forward a report last September regarding public engagement in our permitting actions and is now working to improve public transparency in those actions. There are 3 additional AB 423 requirements which are still in progress and which will be coming back to the board this fall. First, we'll be preparing our another first, annual air quality report as an independent district, and that's going to summarize air quality data, enforcement actions, budget information, and program outcomes. We will also be coming back to the board for the consideration and development of an indirect source rule for the district. And finally, we will be preparing a comprehensive monitoring plan that builds upon our existing regional monitoring network plan and community air monitoring plan for the portside environmental justice communities. And just as an aside on that item, we just received notification of an EPA grant. Again, more funding coming in. This will fund 6 more real-time PM 2.5 monitors in our regional network, enabling us to have real-time PM 2.5 monitors at all of our regional network locations, which is a great addition to our existing monitoring network. So in addition to all the work to implement AB 423, during the last year, we also completed the cost recovery plan, the portside community emission reduction plan. We tightened our air toxics rule, Rule 1210. We launched a new incentives program, the Portside Air Quality Improvement and Relief Program, expanded our mobile source enforcement program, and adopted an incident response plan, among many, many other accomplishments. And so I would just like to conclude by thanking district staff for their hard work and dedication in making the transition envisioned by AB 423 a reality. They confronted an incredible number of hurdles and challenges in the midst of a pandemic, all the while keeping up with the day-to-day operations of the district. It's been an amazing first year, and I'm thankful for this board's support and leadership, and especially our leadership from Chair Vargas. And I'm really, really proud to be part of such an incredible team. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. We're very lucky to have you. Are there any questions to our chair, to our pollution control officer? before we continue? I have some comments, but I'm going to go ahead and wait. All right. Are there, we did not have a governing ad hoc committee meeting, and so we don't have any reports, but we will be having a meeting set up. We have a couple of items that we're going to be meeting about, and so for the governance committee members, we're going to be sending you all some doodles, and so make sure that you respond to that so we can set up a meeting. And any board member updates? I just wanted to say again, thank you to the team for everything that you've done. You know, a happy anniversary. And I want to say thank you to Paula for leading the efforts through the transition, and then also in her new role. She has absolutely hit the ground running, but I wanted to say thank you to the team and to the staff. I know that I'm going to come and chat with all of you soon, but I wanted to say thank you. I know change is tough, but all of you have done an exceptional job, and have done really have stepped up to really ensure that our communities have access to information, and have done it, you know, as fast as you can. And so we are a work in progress, and I'm hoping that we continue to do as much as we can for our communities. I also wanted to thank you for a very, very successful, what I thought was a very successful meeting for the first time, having the APCD and Stand Up come together for a much needed conversation workshop, and as regional entities to really be able to in our first year have a conversation around where the intersection is between social equity and air pollution and transportation, and what that looks like, and how we're going to be working together as we're moving forward. And so I'm excited about that. There were 2 meetings at CARB in February, and it was really my honor to have the first motion in February 10th to approve the 2 new communities of AB 617 for the Community Air Protection Program, for the San Diego border communities to advance air monitoring and develop our next community emission reduction plan. And those would have not been possible were not for the work of our community, our EJ communities, right? Environmental Health Coalition, Casa Familiar, all of the folks on the ground that have been so instrumental in making sure that we're here, that we are where we are right now. So I wanted just to make sure that I said that on the record, because without them, we would not be as advanced as we are right now. And then at the February 24th and 25th meetings, the board also approved the new rules to phase out diesel fuel transport refrigeration units, and set goals for equipment to be zero emission by 2035, and also advance the community air grants for community partners across the state. And it was about 10 million total. And so I'm really happy to share that San Diego was awarded approximately $900,000 to 3 local organizations, Environmental Health Coalition, Casa Familiar, and the San Diego City College Foundation. All were advanced funding for air monitoring, education, and community engagement in Portside and the border. So I'm excited about the work that's happening at CARB, and I'm happy to report back to all of you if anybody needs anything from me. We have a meeting today at 4:30, and happy to continue to share with all of you anything that's happening. But any other board members have any comments or reports before we continue? Nope. All right, if there's any other questions or comments, that concludes the business for today. The next meeting of the Air Pollution Control District Governing Board is going to take place on April 14, 2022. And we'll let you know if we're doing it in person or via Zoom. I would love to, if maybe you all can let me know what works best for everybody. I know, especially for folks who are traveling, it seems like it's a good way. If you're coming from Oceanside or some other area, sometimes it seems our folks from Escondido and everywhere else. Although I had to go to Torrey Pines the other day, and it took me about an hour and a half for an 8 o'clock meeting to get there from Chula Vista. So anyway, let me know. And it's also a good way, to our community to be engaged. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for the team, and thank you, Paula, and everyone else. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. See you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Yes, we are finished. The meeting is concluded. Thank you both.